Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is Ruby Price, and today we're having a watch along of the 2014 Bahrain Grand Prix. Before we get into the episode, we must thank our sponsor for this episode, Bet Online. The biggest betting weekend of the year is finally here, which means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all online betting. They have hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, and exclusive in-game live betting. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. Visit the website today and make the game day action count just a little bit more. BetOnline, the game starts here. So, housekeeping out of the way, today we're watching along with you the 2014 classic, the Bahrain Grand Prix, the Duel in the Desert. To join in, simply go to F1 TV and press start on the race coverage when I give the signal. If you're unprepared, pause this episode now and go do all of that. Make a brew, grab a drink, maybe some snacks, come back to this episode, and after my countdown, press play when I say play. So now that you've done all of that, let's get on with it. Three, two, one, play. And as we do that, joining me today, we've got Grid Talk's very own George Howson and Owain Medford. George, how are you doing? How are you feeling about rewatching this classic F1 experience?
I'm doing very well, Ruby. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's good to go back. A bit of nostalgia is always nice, especially on a Sunday morning like this as we record it. This is without a doubt one of the best races in the V6 Turbo Hybrid era, and a race that I think a lot of people probably haven't seen because it's pre-Drive to Survive, of course. So if it's the first time you're experiencing it, then you can get our thoughts at the same time. So it's a two for one, really.
A two for one. I'm very much looking forward to reliving this classic race. Owain, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Any nostalgia member berries showing up already just from what you've seen so far?
Yeah, I'm feeling great. I've been looking forward to this, to be honest, because not only is it, I think one of the seminal moments of this season. I think also just already I've had the old 2014, well, it's 2012 to 2014 F1 intro, which because I'm that kind of nerd, I'm just like this. That's my favorite part, just because you hear this, they put this screaming V8s in there, even though they weren't in this season. This was the first year of the turbo hybrids that we've got now. And it just feels so fast for some reason. Um,
Yeah, it really starts off with momentum, like if you compare it to like today's F1 intro graphic with all the drivers in the light room with all the graphics and stuff, it looks fun, it looks cool, it looks artsy, but it doesn't feel speedy, it doesn't feel motorsport, it doesn't feel pinnacle of motorsport. But just from like the waves and the way that it keeps moving, the V8 engine noises, it's just obviously we're not going to get that experience, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. As we're just watching, drivers sat on the grid, and we're about to get our starting grid lineup, which I will leave to George.
Yes, this is something I've always wanted to do. Of course, Mercedes during this time were absolutely dominant. Nico Rosberg getting his first pole position ahead of Sir Lewis Hamilton. Valtteri Bottas in the Williams in third place. Sergio Perez in the Force India in fourth. Kimi Raikkonen in fifth place. Jenson Button, that's a throwback. McLaren in sixth place. Kevin Magnussen in eighth place. Felipe Massa in seventh place. Fernando Alonso still around in F1 day today, of course, in ninth place. Sebastian Vettel coming off of four championships in a row in 10th. Nico Hulkenberg in 11th. Daniel Kvyat in 12th in the Toro Rosso. Danny Ricciardo, 10th place grid penalty for him. He would have lined up third, but he's in 13th. Unlucky for him. John-Eric Verne in 14th. Esteban Gutierrez, another throwback, in 15th. Roman Grosjean in 16th. Pastor Maldonado, the legend himself, in 17th. Kamui Kobayashi in the Caterham, that's another throwback, in 18th. Jules Bianchi, absolute legend, RIP, in 19th place there. Marcus Ericsson, 20th. Max Chilton in 21st. And Adrian Suttle rounding off the grid in 22nd, thanks to a grid penalty. Wow, that is much harder than I thought it was going to be, but we got there.
All credit
Oh.
to yourself. I did this before we recorded it. All credit, I think, to anyone that actually does that for a living. Like, wow, I got chills listening to that. Well done, George.
that was
Thank you.
impressive.
I can breathe now.
Really impressive. Had you seen the starting grid before we started this session? Oh, we've got
Nope.
team radio and it's gone. Never mind.
Did not catch that from Grosjean, or
Did
to
not catch
Grosjean
that.
probably.
Um, But yeah, so as we can see, we've got about 3 minutes until the formation lap gets underway. We're just going to be talking through, we're going to be providing our own sort of like, opinions and reviews as things are going on. We're not necessarily providing, live commentary, but, we might give it a go over the 50 or so laps we've got ahead of us. Um, Owain, like, how are you feeling about this grid? Like these cars, they're very different. They're obviously smaller than the cars we've got currently, um, but they're still big cars. Crucially, I think.
Yeah, this was. I mean, so just when they introduce, if you're not sort of so up on the technical nature of Formula One, like I think I said earlier, this is the start of the turbo hybrid era, and what that means is we move from a KERS system, which is quite a small battery pack, out allowing you sort of 8 seconds a lap of of an extra 80 horsepower. That was in 2013, and we'd actually instead moved now to 160 horsepower from the energy units and a much bigger battery to support that for a longer period of the lap. And what that means is the cars started to get significantly longer. This is the start of what what we're finding today is that the cars are almost 5 meters long. The Mercedes here are sort of maybe the size of a medium-sized Mercedes saloon, and it's after this that they sort of realise, I think the aerodynamicists, that the larger the cars were, the more aerodynamic performance you could get out of them from the floor specifically. We've got a slow mover off the grid. I'm not sure who that is. And it looks like it's, I think, Jenson Button. No, no way. Hold on. That looks like it's Sergio Perez. Sorry, but it says as the aerodynamicists noticed that the larger you made the cars, the more aerodynamic performance you got, and also it takes up that little bit more space on track. So they sort of turned ideally you'd want the smallest car possible, but they sort of turned that into an advantage, and that sort of led to where we've got today with these large cars that are quite hard to race, not just in width but in length as well.
Yeah, it is quite funny looking at, whenever we've seen those sort of like behind the scenes clips that they do before a race, then they go to like the Mercedes headquarters and you see the 2014, 2015 Mercedes, and then you see the beast of the 2016 Mercedes, and then somehow it still gets bigger. Um, but yeah, like George, at the moment we can see a Sahara Force India on the screen. How good is that? How good does that livery look? Is this like triggering any nostalgia for you?
It's aged. Yeah, there's some fantastic liveries on the grid. I mean, the Martini Williams being a very, very nice one, of course. The Horror Force India too. I do miss the Chrome McLaren. I love the Papaya McLaren nowadays, of course, but I grew up with the silver McLaren. The old Vodafone livery, which I think we don't have this year, unfortunately, but it's still chrome, which is the main thing. So yeah, some real nostalgic teams. I mean, hey, there we go, Lewis Hamilton in the '07 or '08 one. I can't really tell, one of the two.
Oh
Displayed
wait, it
by
had 22 on it.
Nice, right? So, yeah, no, definitely some big nostalgia with some of the. I mean, it's cool just seeing some of the old teams as well. Caterham, Marussia, it's unfortunately consigned to the history books these days.
Yeah, unfortunately consigned to the history books, but just seeing these teams that still existed, the prospect of a 12 team grid, or was this an 11 team? This would have been an 11
11.
team grid because we had 22 starters. That was something like I wanted to touch on obviously as well, but we can wait until probably, things are underway because we are approaching obviously like the final corner. There's going to be what, 2 minutes of being sat on the grid almost. Like with cars and temperatures just rocketing up, as we do this night race in the desert for the first time. This
Mm,
is, of course, the first time Bahrain went into the night. And, I think how many Bahrain Grand Prix do we tend to remember before the 2014 one, other than, for circumstances that might not have necessarily been happening on the track? Like, I can't really think of many. Despite the fact that, I watched probably 7 or 8 Bahrain Grand Prix prior to this one. Um, but I think that's why we've come back to it, and we're gonna see, and you're gonna see if you're watching along with us, just why this race is so revered, why it's, given the time of day that it is, and as we see them forming their way up on the grid, doing that prescribed number of burnouts, just to find the
Oh
bite point,
goodness,
it's
900.
yeah,
Sorry,
the
sorry.
900th
I've just
Formula One
completely cut
Grand
across you
Prix.
there. Sorry, 900th Grand Prix, and then we obviously got the thousandth, which It wasn't
There's been
ridiculous.
over 100 Grand Prix between this and like there's been a lot of Grand Prix. Oh, but we've also got to talk about the aesthetics of this era, which we'll wait until we've got going. But that nose, and there's a worse one. But yeah. So as we see Nico Rosberg still, on the grid, he's been there now for quite a while, waiting for the rest of the field to line up. And I guess that is one of the elements of having more cars on the grid. There's more cars to wait for. And obviously, some of those cars towards the back as well are not powerful, not necessarily relatively powerful, but the lights are coming on. We're ready to go. As Martin Brundle used to say, look but never stare. And it's five lights out, and away we go. I am not David Croft, but
Oh,
that
that's a great start off Massa there. Sorry, he's absolutely done it. He's gone past the Ferrari. Oh, big
a
lock up
big
from
lock up
Perez.
from
Big lock
Sergio
up.
Perez. And Lewis Hamilton's, already taken Nico Rosberg for P1 as well.
I think the big thing with this era is particularly off the line and particularly in the slower corners like that, where turn 1, 2 at Bahrain, these cars aren't very good dynamically. They had a lot of power compared to what they'd had previously, and because of the electric motor, it came in a lot more suddenly. And I think the drivers and the teams and the engine departments were still kind of figuring out how to get the software right. And how to drive these cars in such a way, the drivability is as important as the power. And you'll see, sometimes these, particularly with the skinny tyres on these opening laps, they're locking up everywhere. But also, out of some corners, you'll see them twitching because they've just got so much power under their right foot, and it's much harder to control than it is these days. As we've got a spinner, oh, that's a puncture for Jean-Eric Verne.
That is a puncture for Jean-Eric Verne, and yes, you are right, absolutely, about, the power and how it's needed, and they're just not quite necessarily figuring out, how to get the best out of it at the moment. Um, but yeah, how we don't now we've actually got an actual graphic to tell us about how the order's changed since the start of the race. Remember when we didn't have constant graphics? Definitely one of the biggest quality of life changes and most needed quality of life changes that we've had. Um, and as we get to some team radio,
Oh,
I need to stop talking over the team radio, I think.
It's so
Uh,
hard not to do. I mean, this is
You,
this is Sim still at Ferrari as well. This is Raikkonen, sorry, but yeah, no, it's really hard not to do.
yeah. Go on, George. How's that first lap been for you?
it was entertaining for sure. I don't know what Kimi Räikkönen said there, but he wasn't happy about something, whatever it was, because yeah, this was a really, really bad season for Ferrari. The Mercedes power unit in general, just powering all the top cars. I think the top six were on the grid, were all Mercedes powered. Indeed, they still are on as we run now.
Yeah, as we see the graphic, they're still the top six is Mercedes powered.
Yeah, so the Ferraris and the Red Bull of Vettel being the only non-Mercedes powered cars in the top 10. So, yeah, it's entertaining for sure. I mean, this is like we said, this is a great race, and it's just good to kind of go back. The guy's really struggling as well. That's the other thing. I mean, it's impressive what the drivers can do now and everything, but a bit of variability, a bit of unpredictability, which is why I'm kind of looking forward to the next regulation change in 26. As fun as it's going to be this season coming up. Yeah.
Jean-Eric Verne very much not happy with whoever it was that spun him round and gave him a puncture.
Absolutely mental. So yeah, he's not he's not happy about that.
He's really not. But yeah, as you say, like we're currently in, present day approaching a regulation change for 2026. This was 2014. We had a big technical regulation change with the V6 turbo hybrid engines. Much quieter, giving us, clearer radio messages, even though I haven't interpreted a single one of them so far. But that's personal habit speaking over them. How did both of you? I'll start off with you, George. How did both of you feel about, the change in engine, regulations, and crucially, like, does the noise of an engine really mean that much to you?
It does viewing it on the telly at home. I feel like the difference going from V8s to the V6 turbos was so stark. I mean, we heard the V8s at the very start in the intro, and you compare it to what we've got here, and it's such a difference. I mean, I think they are louder now. They've made measures to make them louder, and I feel like they can run them more aggressively, which also makes them louder as well on the telly. In person, I mean, I've never, well, I've heard a few V8 engines from the F1 days in person, not an actual race. But I can guarantee that the V6 turbo engines are very loud. They are really, really loud. If you see one of those in person and you say they're not loud enough, you need to get your hearing tested. So it's an important thing. I will admit, I was a bit, I was a bit downtrodden about it. I was thinking, "Oh, you know what? I see why they're doing this F1, but I feel like it's a massive risk." Everybody was talking about the cost of the engines skyrocketing and teams going out of business, and unfortunately, we'd see that with Caterham going out of business later in the year, and then it wasn't too long before we lost Manor as well. So F1 was a bit under a cloud with that, but as we've touched on very briefly as well, while the cars were lining up on the grid, the, the most questionable design aspect of 2014 was without a doubt the anteater noses, if we're going to put it politically correctly. We all called them something very different at the time, though. That was the thing where I was just like, what on earth are you guys thinking with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Much bigger like concerns than the sound of the engine in 2014. They had to rewrite the rules to make the cars have a more pleasing aesthetic to them, as we see a replay of what happened at the start. And as you pointed out, Owain, a great launch from Felipe Massa. The Mercedes just absolutely steaming away at the front, the two of them, in a class of their own. As we also watch from Fernando Alonso, and his onboard, and just how that was a bit of a lunge. But as you can see, just that lockup from the Force India in front of him, and Fernando Alonso in his classic way, just muscling the car through, doesn't quite be again up against Jenson Button, but what a launch from Lewis Hamilton here. Talk us through it, Wayne.
Yeah, so he's got a better launch than in the first phase, and it's kind of continued. But luckily, well, crucially, he's got that inside line. So he's, you can dictate the line of the corner. There we go. He's left maybe half a car's width for Nico Rosberg to use, and there's kind of nothing you can do about that point at that point. So you don't really get the ability to muscle in. Obviously, Nico Rosberg there has tried to run it around the outside, but he's been squeezed out. And that, for this stage of the race, I think it's like that. He's really just kind of got him there, and that's sort of how to, that's textbook how to take your teammate's place at turn one.
Yeah.
I think this was the era though, or this year that Lewis Hamilton wasn't doing so well in qualifying compared to Nico Rosberg. Like he's as much as he got pole in Malaysia before this. I was just having a look, just sort of to get to sort of story of the season. But obviously he what was it? He had a retirement in Australia, yeah, and then was sort of a lights to flag victory in Malaysia. So it was kind of, I think at this point in the season we were like, we didn't really know how it was going to go. We sort of, was it going to be a walkover? What was going to happen? Like we couldn't, but obviously we could tell the Mercedes was the fastest. But at least my memories of this year, of this particular time in the season, were that we sort of didn't really know how it was going to pan out. And I think we got our first taste really. With this race, this is why it's so important and why it's so revered, just because of all the action that's happened all down the grid, but particularly at the front.
Yeah, exactly. This, as we see an replay of the overtake of the Force India on Fernando Alonso. Can you imagine now? The Aston Martin potentially of Lance Stroll, I guess, would be the equivalent, overtaking Charles Leclerc of the Ferrari into turn one. Ferrari absolutely dropped the ball in 2014, George. But just how, they've clawed it back somewhat since then, but how badly did like 2014 really push them back?
Oh, it was massive. I mean, in 2013, for those that don't remember, the Red Bull was the absolute dominant car by a massive difference. Vettel broke a lot of records during that year that only Max Verstappen's broken now, recently in the last couple of seasons. But Ferrari, probably on the balance of things in 2013, probably had the second best car. Fernando Alonso was the only guy not in a Red Bull to just some instructions from his engineer there on the radio, which is now, of course, banned. You can't do things like that nowadays. That's something that's changed in the last few years or so. But yeah, no, Ferrari absolutely dropped the ball. It was the engine that was the main problem for them. I mean, anybody who didn't have a Mercedes engine was just nowhere relatively, and the Renault was pretty terrible as well. Red Bull's car, I mean, I would personally argue that Red Bull's car, in terms of their chassis, wasn't that far off of the Mercedes this year, but the Mercedes engine was worth I mean, we'll see later on in the race, it was worth easy 2, 3 seconds a lap around these power tracks. And Ferrari were in the same boat as well. They really, really struggled. I mean, they've got Fernando Alonso, without a doubt, one of the greatest drivers of the last 20 years or so. And you've got Kimi Raikkonen as well. I would also argue one of the best drivers of the last 20 years or so. And they're struggling to get points. They're in eighth and ninth, I think, running at the moment, all the two Ferraris. And they've got the likes of yeah, just more coaching there for Rosberg as those two. I mean, look at the gap for the Mercedes already. It's coming up to half a straight,
It's
miles
only
clear of
been seven
everybody.
laps, or six
Ex
laps.
exactly, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah,
As
Ferrari
as we
messed up
watched
massively.
Maldonado overtaking the Sauber of I don't know who that would be. We don't have a driver tracker, unfortunately. Um, carry on.
We'll have to rely on the ticker tape at the bottom of the screen, which is something I don't miss.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, and we've got a fuel used percentage graphic. This
I
is
love this. The kind of insight we got out of this was really important, I thought, and it told you the energy use and things like that at various times. I think it's a shame that that's gone. Sorry to cut over you.
No, of course. It's a weird time. We get more information than we currently do sometimes, but then sometimes we get significantly less. Like, in 2024, 2025 Formula One, we can see where every single driver is on, the circuit relative to each other pretty much for the entire race, unless there's an issue with the graphics. Whereas, back in this day and age, we very much relied on like the commentary as, an audience to provide that information. And as we're experiencing right now, unless you have all those systems providing that information for you, it's quite difficult.
it's not the easiest. No, I mean, yeah, seeing only five drivers at a time going around on the ticket tape. I mean, it just from this NASCAR had a similar system as well, and probably still does on the live coverage of just people being rotated around slowly. We can criticize F1 as much as we want, but that is something that's definitely got better. That is definitely something that's got better. The information that we get nowadays. I'd argue though, personally, it's gone a bit too far with some things like striking distance and you'll meet this person in 2, 3 laps or whatever and stuff like that. It's like, is it really that accurate though? I don't know. I'm not very trustworthy, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between providing real-time data and, what's currently happening versus, predictions based on that data. Where there's so many different variables that will have a different impact, as much as, these drivers are the best in the world, they can be the most consistent if required. The track changes, the tires degrade, we're not, we, the data that we see on those predicted AWS graphics is based off what's happened before, but what could still happen is a mystery. And we've seen it time and time again that the striking distance might be way off. Maybe a driver will give up on a position because oh, it's just safer to stay for the points that we've got rather than try and make some forwards momentum. Yeah, it's sometimes there is too much data, as much as we love seeing it. Um,
Feel like
you know,
having an XG counter, next to the
Oh,
scoreboard in football.
oh,
for
XG.
context at home,
Oh, sorry, I should probably explain. XG is a metric that I've seen it more recently come into football in maybe probably the last 3 years, something like that. Probably since the World Cup in Qatar. Um, and it's probably around before that for people who are more into it. But it's the expected goals. So not a dangerous run, but like let's say like sort of a dangerous attack or something, or a long ball and or a break will contribute a certain amount of xg. Maybe that be zero point 0.2 or whatever. And so you're typically seeing. Oh, there's Was
A
that
bit
metal
a
going?
bit of a
No, that's
rear
Ricardo.
lock on, a bit of a rear wobble from Ricardo trying to get past Kevin Magnussen there.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it with the rear lockup. It looked like a rear lockup. That was
The
one of the big.
torpedo.
It was one of the big things with these cars was the brake by wire. Yeah, he hadn't quite turned into that yet. But no, it's one of the big things with these cars was a lot of the braking for the rear came from the motor generator unit. And sometimes they got, they hadn't refined it so much. Sometimes you got it a bit wrong, and you got those rear snaps. But yeah, no, XG is it's it's sort of all the rage in modern football, but it's one of these things where I'm just like, oh, do we really need to know, whether a seam run or something like that has got point 0.2 of an XG extra for Man United or whatever?
That's
Probably not Man
absolutely
United.
fair enough. Um, yeah, like just rewatching this replay then of Daniel Ricciardo, obviously starting in P13 due to an unsafe release in the Malaysian Grand Prix the weekend, well, the race weekend previously, in which he also received an automatic drive-through penalty. It might have even been a stop and go, and was stationary for 2 minutes, pounding on the penalties there compared to, what we've seen in more recent eras where that might, the unsafe release, that's probably a fine for the team rather than an actual penalty for the driver. If there was going to be a penalty for the driver, maybe like a 5 second time penalty towards the end of the race. But no, we're seeing an actual penalty have an application to a race weekend afterwards. And George, this was just because they didn't get his front left tire on. Like, is that really fair on Daniel Ricciardo to be given a 10 place grid penalty for the next race?
No, I don't think it is. I'm glad they've changed stuff like that because I get it. His race is ruined at that point, so any penalty you give him for that race is, gonna is not gonna really affect him. But at the same time, it's not his fault. That's his pit crew. Like the thing is, right? People might say, "Oh, well, they should have seen the car coming." It's just like, no, you see the green light or the lollipop man or whatever they had at this time, and you just go. You can't question it. This is F1. Every tenth of a second matters. So, no, I feel I've always felt that's a very wrong one. Yes, it should be punished. Yes, it is unsafe, but it is not the driver's fault. I mean, the lack of visibility they have in these cars in general means that they'd have no chance of seeing it anyway. Because if he looked to his left, all he'd see is like three dudes stood either side of it. That's all he'd see, you know?
Yeah, as we see a replay of Jenson Button getting past Valtteri Bottas, and then I think this puts him on the back foot, and Nico Hulkenberg makes a move later on in the lap too. But look at that, Valtteri Bottas hanging it around the outside of Jenson Button. This is early Valtteri Bottas as well. At this point he's not necessarily the stalwart
Oh, here we go.
Finnish soldier that we see. Here
Vern's
we
about to
go.
be lapped.
Vern's about to be lapped. Yeah, the last time I saw a timing screen, he was 93 seconds off the lead with that first lap delamin. Was it a delamination? I guess
I
the
think.
kind of the carcass came off the tire. Um,
I think he got hit. I think he said he got
yeah,
hit. Yeah,
Yeah, he got
but
hit, but I also, I think
Nico Hulkenberg experiencing understeer there, gone away.
I was going to say, I think he got hit, but also they had a big mare at the pit stop where they couldn't get the rear jack in, so that's probably given him a lot of, give it, put him down significantly down the order in that way too. We got the first pit stops coming in on lap
oh, look
11.
at that camera angle. Nice one.
A good old
Yeah,
GoPro on a helmet.
live GoPro.
Live GoPro as well. Fantastic. Bottas coming out then just ahead of the Caterham. Wow, this is actually quite hard to identify cars from certain color schemes and certain angles. But also when you've not been looking at these cars for an entire season. But yeah, let's talk about those cars towards the back then. Obviously, Caterham, Marussia, Manor. I think at this point it is still just Marussia. And of course, we've also kind of got to lump in the Lotus there, just given how much their performance dropped off given the 2014 season. I don't, there may be an impact of that nose that they've got. There may be just the impact of having Pastor Maldonado and who was his teammate?
Grosjean.
Roman Grosjean. Roman Grosjean showing up as well. What was I gonna say? Yeah, so of course the Lotuses, they've lost a lot of performance. They're at the back. The Marussias, I believe, have had like Max Chilton and who's the other one?
Jules Bianchi.
Jules Bianchi, thank you, George. They're so far off the pace, and then you've got the Caterhams as well. Marcus Ericsson, he was having brake locking and energy recovering issues. Jules Bianchi apparently losing 3/10 of a second on the straights alone. Like, how underperformed and how underprepared were these new teams for, well, not even new teams at this point, but just they weren't ready, I don't think.
They were unfortunately sold a lie basically when they came into F1. Them and those two and HRT all came in 2010. And Max Mosley was like, right, budget cap, you're going to be fine. You can compete, no problem. You'll be on a level playing field financially with the big boys.
Oh, we're seeing a lockup in this fight between the Williams and the Force India. Sergio Perez ahead of, is this Valtteri Bottas or is that
It's
Felipe Massa?
massive.
That's Felipe Massa. Of course it's Felipe Massa. He's got the Brazilian as he
Oh,
locks up again. Ah, but
He's
yes,
been
go
locking
on,
up a lot,
George.
actually. This is for third, and by the way, this is for third.
battle for the
This is for
podium.
third.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, Force India and Williams at this current point are in quite a fight for, I think, P4 in the Constructors' Championship.
Switcheroo.
As we see the switcheroo. Fantastic, brilliant, beautiful.
Oh yeah, I mean some great battles. I mean the thing is Bahrain with these cars as well being a power track, I feel like it really helped them in terms of being able to overtake. That is something that did not struggle to do. DRS maybe being a little bit overpowered, but we're seeing some great moves through the corners as well. In fairness, like they're overtaking everywhere.
Yeah, it's
Um,
not just about having that straight line speed just for the straights,
mm,
like when you're seeing the cars with that confidence through the corners to be like, trying to go around the outside or maybe even just taking alternative lines to the driver they're trying to get past or even defend against, real, ingenuity almost from some of the drivers that we're seeing. But going back to that fight then at the back, Owain, was there anything you wanted to add on that?
Um, Not at all, really. I'll be honest, I can't remember the battle. I moved on mentally. I was just like, no.
I
Oh,
mean,
big lock up again for the Williams.
it just kind of goes to show once again, the legacy that Marussia and Caterham didn't necessarily leave around, but maybe
Oh, actually,
that's
wait, hold on. I do remember one thing is that I remember at this point these cars were actually we got the 20% fuel used, which makes sense. We're about 20% through the race. Is that the slower cars were unfortunately with the changes that were made for this season, some of them were actually slower in certain conditions than the GP2 cars that they were supposedly meant to be faster than. Yeah, with the skinny tires and all that, because GP2, which would become F2. Yeah, it was kind of worse. You're seeing lockups everywhere. Oh,
oh, we've
someone's
got
been hit.
Adrian Sutil. Yeah, he's definitely been hit. You can see just there's
Tire
no
on tire contact, and he's got a front right
yeah.
puncture. It looks like.
Wow. So he's been hit on the rear left, but the front
No,
right
yeah,
appears to be the thing that's, suffering the problem. He's still trying to keep it going. We're going to
Oh,
see a
here we go. We're
replay
gonna get a
here. It's the
replay.
Marussia.
This is right. Oh
Does he just turn in?
no, he squeezes him out, and I think he had that Marussia had owned the right to the corner, as far as I'm concerned. So I don't wait. Hold on, what's happened there then? Because how's the
so
front? Oh wait, here we go. This will probably
Yankees
be
trying
it.
to overtake.
Oh,
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 barge
that's
board
what's
into the
done it.
tire. That's definitely done it. So they've still just carried on fighting almost. But is this a bit of a lunge? Is
oh
it
yeah. That was
like
a
He's
that
locked
was
his rear
definitely.
tires and slid into him there.
I
That's
was going to
what's
say that was
happened.
definitely a dive bomb and then a rear lock.
yeah, and as I say, the Marussia's losing 3/10 of a second on the straights, like those kind of desperate moves is what they were being reduced to. Like that was
Oh,
probably that looked like a bit of a snap from the Ferrari there.
I
I
don't
think
think
he
it
saw
was. I
some
think
debris.
yeah, I think he was trying to avoid debris. One thing I did think was with these cars, I think one of the reasons we're seeing more lockups and mistakes and also moves from further back is that typically, if you don't know, the longer the braking zone is, the longer and more.
Reliability issues for Vettel there. The
Yeah,
DRS isn't working.
yeah, that's something. I mean, it's not going to matter because he's not within a second. Yeah, not within a second of the car behind. But the issue is that he's got his teammate right on his tail, and but if he's trying to get past people, that's going to be a big issue. Um, One of the things I was saying was that yeah, the longer the braking zone is, the more opportunity there is for mistakes, and that's what typically where you see passes. That's one of the reasons that we like Bahrain is because it's got quite long straights into quite big braking zones. But I think with these cars, they didn't have so much aerodynamic grip, compared to what we have now. They didn't have that aerodynamic drag to help with the braking, so but you had a lot more power than you had previously. So these cars were going a lot faster but with less aerodynamics to slow them down, and it's why we're getting some of the sends that you're seeing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're seeing at the moment Vettel defending against Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo starting off 2014, you know, performance-wise strongly. Obviously, Australia, he got that podium, which was later taken away for a fuel flow irregularity, or at least a sensor fail on the FIA's perspective as far as Christian Horner was concerned. Um, but Sebastian Vettel just, he had a podium in Malaysia. Able to still get a P3. But of course, 2014 on the whole, Daniel Ricciardo, I believe, gets 3 wins. Sebastian Vettel doesn't win until he joins Ferrari for 2015, George.
Yeah, the only guy in 2014 not driving a Mercedes to win a race, and he won 3 of them. This was very much like, my God, how good is Ricardo? Because Vettel's won the previous 4 championships. He's been, and now, and now Ricardo's asking to get past, and he lets him past.
It's weird
Daniel
that he
is
let him
faster than
pass.
you.
I was going to say, is that multi 43 or whatever?
I think that is. Oh no, because they've changed the numbers. This is the first year we had custom grid numbers.
Oh, of
Driving
course
numbers,
it
isn't
is. I'm
it?
being
So
silly.
multi
Gosh.
31, mate. Multi 31.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first season where you drivers could actually have an identifiable their own driver number, and if you were the champion from the previous season, you could elect to choose number one or have your own preference. And I think at this point, Sebastian Vettel's still driving around with number one. Um,
Mhm.
and I haven't seen his car recently at the very
I
least.
believe he was. I
Yes.
believe
He
he
did,
was,
yeah.
yes. He hadn't
And
moved to
then
number 5 yet.
yeah,
No,
and then
is it number 5?
yeah, it
He
is
did go
number
to 5,
five.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry.
Roman numerals V for Vettel. There you go. That's how you remember it.
Ah.
Is that the actual reason that he picked it, or?
I don't know. That's just how I remember it.
I think he went red 5 for a bit of a Mansell tribute sort of thing, maybe, because he went to Ferrari for next year, didn't he? But
Okay.
Ah,
not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe not.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, because I presume he would have still had to actually register a number
Yeah, yeah.
to
mm,
have alongside his number one. Um, but yeah, I couldn't tell you in terms of an actual personal reason. Um,
Maybe he's just a big Star Wars fan.
yeah.
that's what I was thinking. Um,
Sorry, I'm just remembering the Family Guy bit of of was it Blue Harvest or whatever? They go
Yeah.
through the things of red, simply red standing by. Sorry.
simply red standing
Simply
by.
red.
Yeah. It's like Red October standing by, but it's like got Sean Connery's accent.
So apparently it was because he drove with it in 2001 in karting. Um,
A lot of them use their
you know,
karting
he was
numbers. Yeah,
successful in
Mm.
karts in 2001 with the number
that was track
five.
limits. Sorry.
Was that
Not policed as much back then.
No,
not
no,
policed as
no.
much? But this particular weekend they did remove a curb at turn four, and the stewards did say during practice that they would be more actively monitoring track limits around that corner for this weekend. So we're
Mm.
starting to see, in this F1 history, more of a prominence of that discussion around track limits as we see the Ferrari and that is a good Lotus livery at the very least. The car itself may not be performing and it's got a horrible nose, that isn't even symmetrical. Look at it a little bit closer and you'll see that only one side of that front wing is actually attached to the
Uh,
sort of walrus nose. How did we describe it
It
back
was.
then?
I think it was Tusks. I believe
Tusks.
it was Tusks. Walrus Nose is the 2004 Williams, I believe,
That's right. Yeah.
which I just think was well. Right, I'm a proper nerd about that because I remember it. I was like, why is that car different when I was a kid? No, the big thing about the walrus nose was actually, funnily enough, it was designed to do exactly what the teams are trying to do here. Is we've got a gaggle of cars on screen at one time. This is
Yeah,
is
and
that Sito going slowly?
I think he's being lapped because there's a lot of cars in this
Oh
current
yeah,
screen that aren't on. Oh, as we see
Oh,
Rosberg making a move on Lewis Hamilton into turn one.
absolute send there.
Oh, and
Oh
Hamilton's
no,
immediately come
Hamilton's
across
come
to
back
defend
across
it.
him.
Did they
Shut the
touch
door.
there?
No, I don't think he did, but it was close.
Ah,
No, funnily enough, the reason why we've got these noses, by the way, very, very quickly, is that the teams wanted to maximise airflow to the underside of the car. What they did was they did that by raising the noses as high as possible. That's what you saw in sort of 2010 to about 2020, 2010 and 2011.
yeah. I think they called them platypus noses, like colloquially.
yeah.
Yeah, because they were wide and flat. And then the FIA, because of the side impact danger to the driver's head, because they were roughly the height of the driver's head, wanted to bring those down. So in 2012, we got reduction in height, and then we got that in 2013, less so. But 2014, you had to bring it right down. But a lot of teams didn't want to do that for the aerodynamic penalty.
Rosberg not happy about Lewis Hamilton's defending there. At this point as well in the narrative, still really good friends as, the what they were trying to say. But I think going into this weekend, everyone was expecting this is a championship fight between the two Mercedes, the karting duo, the friends, Monaco based. And going into this weekend, we knew what was going to happen. But, Nico Rosberg, there's so much space on that left-hand side. But Lewis Hamilton just cuts across him. Is that a fair move? Would you say that's within, how would that be policed today?
I think it would be fine. They didn't touch. I mean, they typically know, he didn't force him off the track or anything like that. But oh, here we go again. Again, trying the same move. Rosberg. Oh, they've come to
Both of
almost a
them lock
dead
up.
stop. And there we go. This one's less bad because they were both sort of roughly side by side.
Yeah, but
Here
Nico
comes
Rosberg's now in the
Hamilton.
lead.
He is, but in the slipstream, Hamilton's behind.
Almost sharing the same, like, Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes almost disappeared behind Nico Rosberg's there on the picture. They were
Side by
that.
side.
Oh,
Oh,
through turn six. Oh, he's running out of road there. This is all fair. This is all fair game. He's not hit him or anything, and they've left racing room. That's the only thing I would say is that Hamilton was on a different line, and he kind of he left him racing room. You could say he was driving at him, but he would say he was driving at the apex.
Yeah, I think the stewards had let this go. In fairness, they only seem to get properly involved with actual penalties if it's something pretty egregious during the race. So I think this would be all right. But yeah, fantastic battle between the two Mercedes. I mean, again, as much as people might criticize this kind of era where Mercedes are just romping away with it at the front of the field, you only need two cars to have a good race, and these two are absolutely going at it because, yeah, Hamilton had that retirement in the first race of the season, won the next race, and very much trying to catch Nico Rosberg at the top of the championship because it was already very apparent it was going to be one of these two guys winning the championship this season.
yeah, and because of that retirement as well, there's a big points difference between Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg at the moment. Lewis Hamilton pits then from the lead. This was one of the things we saw quite often from Mercedes. The lead driver gets the preference on the strategy. But if I remember correctly, they had two team strategists almost, like one for Nico Rosberg, one for Lewis Hamilton. Whereas in previous sort of like team setups, they were very much going for something different. Where like you had a whole team sort of strategy, but because we knew that that fight was coming down between the two of them, every single one of them wanted every benefit between the two.
Yeah, we've seen it a lot. We've seen it a lot when there's been a team that's been miles ahead and two drivers, in theory, on equal footing. We saw it a lot with McLaren back in the day with Ayrton Senna and Alan Prost always wanting the best engines, the best engine. Oh, that was so close. That was nearly a
So
Yeah,
punch
but
there for
it's
Checo.
Perez overtaking Alonso. Like this was how bad and how underperforming the Ferrari engine was. Clearly it was second in terms of power, but the cars it was in, it was so poor.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, the Force India, making moves on a works Ferrari, just that is a PR nightmare almost, given, where Force India were a few seasons before this.
This was the era of unlimited budgets as well, and it
Mm.
was 400, sort of approaching 400 million pounds a year. And particularly with the engines, they probably would have spent billions in the last 2 or 3 years leading up to
Mm.
this. And you got a Force India that's on a customer engine, very good customer engine, but a customer engine. Sorry, I've just completely.
So they're
Oh, he
talking about
stops.
strategy in the Red Bull park there.
Yeah, three
Um,
stop race. They're thinking, but yeah, no, like the shoestring budget that Force India was on, particularly with maybe the debt that VJ Malia was sort of alleged to have had.
yeah,
Uh,
definitely. Um, George, in the run up to it, you mentioned this sort of chrome McLaren that we've got. Obviously, this isn't the red and chrome McLaren. This is the black and chrome McLaren.
Mm.
Signifying some things a bit different compared to the previous seasons. And of course, the next season we get the McLaren Honda, where they really do move away from the chrome. Like after a few races of realizing that no, we're so underpowered. We need to save as much weight as possible. And they basically went down to the Mercedes route of here's just a carbon black car with some red aspects to it. But it's still got the anteater nose. But what do you think of this era McLaren at the very least?
This year's McLaren, I mean, I think it looks all right. Yeah, it's not as good as it used to be. Obviously, with the Vodafone on there, chrome and black is not the best combo. Um, I would say that it obviously looks better now with the papaya there. I think it looks awesome, to be honest with you. McLaren, McLaren's such a mixed year in 2014. I mean, they got that double podium as it was in Australia. Nico Rosberg coming into the pit soon. But that was very much flattering to deceive. I don't think they had many podiums, if any podiums, for the remainder of 2014, or
They
not
did
as many.
not
No.
until I think Carlos Sainz's
Oh my word.
McLaren one in Brazil, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, it was a long, long time, and
A
yeah,
sad time to be a McLaren fan.
it was a very, very difficult time to be a McLaren fan. I mean, this was like this. Honestly, I genuinely thought to myself, well, at least we've got the Honda engines next year. We'll be fine. It'll be all great. Getting the old band back together,
Ron
and it
Dennis
was.
is coming back as well.
Exactly, what could possibly we'll get Hamilton back in a few years, it'd be great. And it just that was an absolute disaster. McLaren went from being solid midfield in 14 to being solid back marker in 2015. Fernando Alonso worked absolute miracles in that McLaren at times. As did Jenson Button as well. That Honda era, the new Honda era of McLaren. You'd never guess it now because the bones of the Honda engine powered the Red Bull, which is winning drivers' championships and constructors' championships. But when they came back to F1, it was, oh my, just imagine the worst season possible. And it was worse than that, genuinely, for the people who weren't there. It didn't even start some races
Yeah,
quite often, didn't even make it to the grid.
it was truly shocking, and it kind of echoes that sentiment of being sold a lie. We were told, the only way McLaren were gonna win as Rosberg going for the long stint on the prime tires. Of course, only two dry compounds in that Pirelli were bringing to races in 2014. I made a note of it somewhere. We've got the soft options and the medium primes. Remember when we used to refer to the tires as options and primes? But as you were just talking then, George, we got a good example of the not necessarily the undercut, but just the advantage that Lewis Hamilton got from pitting that lap earlier and Nico Rosberg pitting a couple of laps later. That fresh rubber of Lewis Hamilton bringing Nico Rosberg out several laps later, a couple of seconds back when really they were sharing the same piece of tarmac as Lewis Hamilton came into the pits. Um, but yeah, going back to the whole tires thing, then, now obviously we've got three tire compounds that can be used during a race weekend at any point. Whereas, back in this era of Formula One, two dry tire compounds per race weekend, still sort of varying across the medium, the hard, the softs. I think we also still had at this point super softs. Um, but keeping that they kept the consistent tire colors as well for this era of Formula One as well. So the yellows were always that one particular tire compound, whereas nowadays, of course, they change depending on where they fit within the Pirelli range. Um, how important have tires been to Formula One in the last few years?
I mean, hugely. It's changed so much. I mean, Pirelli, when they first came in as the sole tire supplier in 2011, criticized a lot because they designed tires that people didn't like, even though that's what Formula One wanted. And in 2013, the year before this, it really, really reached a head where it was farcical at times. To be honest, the tires were disintegrating. We saw a lot of that at Silverstone. Quite a few punctures there. Punctures stopped Hamilton winning the race, which the locals definitely did not like. He wasn't the only one to be affected by it, of course. And you'd have qualifying sessions where they would literally run so. I mean, we did see this a long time ago
Team
with proper
radio.
qualifying.
Massa, I think, wanting to potentially get ahead of Valtteri Bottas there, which
Saying he's
also would
losing
put
his
him in
rear
P3.
tyres.
Or is he losing his rear tyres?
I think he said that's what he said.
Ah, I thought he was saying he was using the rear tyres ahead. But
Now
yeah,
that's why.
wanting to get ahead of his teammate, I think at the very least.
Yeah, so that's because the Force India is behind.
Yeah. Was it the Silverstone Grand Prix of 2014 where we saw the Williams ahead of the Mercedes for like the first half of the race as well?
That was 2015, I think.
Ah,
But yeah, they,
2015.
they they did him off the start. I think they started third and fourth and just raced off, and then it rained, and then it rained, and it
Mm,
ruined the chances, unfortunately. But Williams was so good. I mean, I think they had a pole position in Austria later this season, something like that. They did very, very well, and got third overall in the constructors. But yeah, great battle between the Force Indias and the Williams here. You know, throw a blanket all over them. They're really close to one another.
Yeah, absolutely. You really could throw a blanket over them, I think. Just sharing all the same bits of tarmac and yeah, a really close fight as well for those recipients of a Mercedes engine. Other than McLaren, who seemingly just weren't as on it as these two teams were. I don't think there's any other teams across the grid that are running the Mercedes engines, at
Mhm.
the very least, because obviously the Marussia, they inherited a Ferrari engine after the Cosworth team, after the Cosworth engines decided not to continue. The Caterhams, I think, went to the Renault, and it's not. Next season, the Lotus will inherit a Mercedes engine for one season, just completely out of the blue. Um, which imagine that Enstone based team having a Mercedes engine, with the brand power of the Renault, like that's never gonna happen again, is it?
I see what you did there.
See what I did there? As we see Valtteri Bottas still defending against Felipe Massa, who's just 2.5 tenths behind him, with a Nico Hulkenberg a further 2.3 tenths behind him. Like this fight, I think is going to last a couple of laps. We're seeing, them two by two, just absolutely powering ahead as those two Mercedes as well, way off in the distance.
I mean, they may as well, sort of, they may as well not be in the race. They're that far ahead. That's so like this is the closest you're going to get to a big
Yeah,
battle for now.
20 seconds the gap, or 14 seconds potentially. It's 20 seconds to the lead at the very least. I'll go for the more reliable stat. Either that or Button is 29 seconds off Fernando Alonso. But yeah, it's just absolutely nuts. I think this era of Formula One and how close we saw the midfield at times, particularly. Valtteri Bottas wanting to box now, if
Oh, they're all
possible.
within a second. Ish. They're all within a
Nearly,
second.
yeah.
I think that yeah, it's
Wow.
it's point three something for all of them at that point. It was almost all within a second.
The real question is, are Williams gonna let Valtteri Bottas come in now? Like, is it possible for him to make that pit stop? Because I think that is potentially the only way he's staying ahead of his teammate right now. And as yet, Valtteri Bottas does come into the pits, presumably going to that longer running, harder tire compound, which, at this point in the race could get him to the end.
Yeah, I mean they're still looking at three stops. I think you'd still need another stop, even just for
Yes.
speed. To be honest with you.
That's my current era Formula One brain
Oh,
kicking in as we see I thought we were going to see the Force India go up the inside then. Now,
braver
was
man than me.
was that Felipe
We are
Oh
Massa?
no, there
different
was a
Force
touch
India
there.
though.
he lost out. He lost out from positioning. So I think
Yeah. Is that Nico Hulkenberg ahead now?
no,
No,
I think
Sergio
it's
Perez
Checo.
ahead, sorry. Checo Perez back in the era of promising Checo as well. Had his stint at McLaren, which just didn't really go very well. Dropped within that first season. Replaced by Kevin Magnussen, but he's found a home at Force India, and he's currently trying to make his impression. And like going from McLaren to Force India, but currently being ahead of the McLarens on track. Like what does that do to a driver? I think.
In
I
in
mean,
terms of what?
Like confidence, he went to McLaren, and I think the consensus was he went to McLaren too early in his career.
Mm,
And it also coincided, unfortunately, with McLaren just not being that front running team anymore. 2013, no wins. I don't know if there were podiums. I don't think so. Um,
don't think so.
yeah, but then dropped, and then Kevin Magnussen shows up for a season, um, gets in the McLaren, but currently Sergio Perez ahead and currently fighting for fourth place with his teammate in the Williams.
Yeah, I mean it was a revival for Perez because he came so close to getting a win in that Sauber in 2012. He had some podiums that he had an incredible. That's why he got the McLaren drive. That's why McLaren were like, right, we need a Hamilton replacement, and Perez could be it. And I genuinely thought he could be it. He had an incredible time, but he just didn't perform as we've seen later on at Red Bull at times. He really does struggle when the car's not quite there. He can't drive the wheels off it when it doesn't work, and he
More
DRS.
DRS issues.
Yeah, that's not working unfortunately for Button there. But yeah, I mean he did incredibly well at Force India. Force India and Perez, I think, are quite similar in a sense. They do very well in the midfield. They do very well on kind of average budgets and stuff. But when they get the money, like because when Force India became Racing Point and they first started to really get bankrolled by Lawrence Stroll, they didn't do quite as well for the most part. And it's a bit like that with Perez. Went to a top team at Red Bull, and for the most part, didn't really perform. So it was great to see Perez performing like this. Him and Hulk, both relatively young drivers at this stage as well, and both pulling out some incredible performances in that car.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of those drivers still on the grid for 2025.
Mm.
Just thinking about it really, who have we got currently that's, still around in Formula One today? Like obviously Lewis Hamilton, not a Mercedes anymore, but this was of course not the start, but where you really saw that Mercedes like domination kicking off. Valtteri Bottas is around Formula One, but not on Formula One, not on the Formula One grid anymore. Sergio Perez again.
oh,
That
sorry,
was a
that was a huge lockup.
It's all right.
Um,
I wasn't looking at it.
he missed out.
so many
No,
battles.
no, it's Hulk. What is it? Hulkenberg, Hamilton. I'm just going by the
Alonso.
ticker tape.
Yeah,
Alonso, yeah.
Alonso. I think that is it, really.
Hold on,
Um,
we'll get another one.
Nobody there.
No, no.
I'm looking at the rest of the list of drivers. Um, but yeah, we've just seen, of course, the two Force Indias getting ahead of Felipe Massa. Is it potentially time for Felipe Massa to come into the pits, or is it because that they're fighting that all of this position changing and swapping is going on?
Oh, he's
Oh,
trying
he's
to go
going
into
back.
turn. Is he trying to go into turn 11?
Not really an overtaking opportunity in most cases.
In a lot of ways, no, but maybe in this era, yes.
Yeah,
As we
it's
see a
weird.
replay of a Red Bull on the Ferrari.
Yeah, it's weird. There's not that many drivers. We've lost quite a few this season just gone. I mean, Bottas is, I mean, he might be back in a full-time driver position at some point. Same with K-Mag potentially. Ricardo's obviously left. He's never coming back, I don't think. But we've lost quite a few in this season just gone. So there's not many left, like you say. Alonso, Hamilton, Hulk.
Oh,
That could have taken both of those cars out there. I think if
it
just
could.
a little bit later on the locking up of the brakes,
This is
just
still when
pulls
Daniel
out at the
Ricciardo
right
was.
point.
Yeah, I think it was still when Daniel Ricciardo was like, well, he was still able to do that seemingly. You just throw it in, sort it out the apex.
Yeah, as we see the Force India versus the Williams once again, I think I will actually get to see this for the second time in my life.
Cut
A
back
good
Yeah,
to
a
turn four
good
there.
move there.
Mm.
As Fernando Alonso comes out the pits in P11, um, another just low point for Ferrari again, I think. Um, but Daniel Ricciardo with Kimi Raikkonen ahead of him, still trying to recover that place on the harder tyres, but the Ferrari on the softer tyres in this circumstances at the very least.
Oh,
yeah.
big lock up for Raikkonen.
We saw Luca Di Montezemolo in the pits earlier on as well when the Ferraris were getting past left, right, and centre. He just turned his back and walked away. Yeah, I might be wrong, but I think Alonso does a very sarcastic gesture at the finish of the race, which was just like I think he was celebrating the position he got, which I won't reveal what it was, but it wasn't very good, as you can probably tell by this is going. But I think he very, very sarcastically celebrated going across the line.
Incredible. Fernando Alonso once again bringing that, you know, memery that we saw more of him, like from 2015 onwards as well. Who can forget the deck chairs, in Brazil or GP2 engine in Japan? Like the man knows when to make a statement and, you know, as we see cars using up 50% of the fuel for the Mercedes, Jenson Button only using 37% of the fuel so far. Um, such a stark difference, but different fuel compounds as well. Drivers pushing differently. Is Jenson Button just not pushing enough to only be using such a low amount of fuel?
It's weird. I mean, you'd almost think that something's gone wrong there with the telemetry or something, because otherwise you'd think, oh, turn it up a bit. Turn it, it's like if you.
So the two tire compounds performing closer than most teams were expecting.
I
Um,
think
of
they must have been expecting more of a difference.
Yeah, because that would, of course, inform all your strategy decisions. We're going to avoid going onto the harder tire like sooner because we don't want to lose as much time. But is that almost a little bit of subtle foreshadowing?
I don't know.
It is a bit.
I think a fair bit of subtle foreshadowing has happened.
Yeah, there's been a lot of subtle foreshadowing. Of course, that gap now out at the front now, 7.5 seconds, and then back to the Force India's behind 23.4 seconds. Just the absolute, class of the field. And, George, you touched on this a little bit earlier. The Mercedes being so far ahead, so dominant in this era, but still providing crucially like the entertainment like side of things, like we're still gripped in what's going on,
Mm.
as viewers. Comparing that to more recent seasons where we have seen, classes of the field not necessarily, having
Oh,
oh
ooh.
wow, pulling out there Valtteri Bottas, avoiding, the back of that Ferrari and Daniel
Did he get
Ricciardo creeping
squeezed?
through ahead. Was that a squeeze or was that
I honestly
taking
don't
avoiding
know. But
action?
what I was
I
going to
think
say was
he.
you could. What I was going to
Owen?
say, sorry, was that you could clearly see the power of the Mercedes engine there. Like even in a slipstream.
Yeah.
No, he was
Oh
fully.
wow.
That was not a squeeze. He was absolutely going to run
Just
into the
broke too
back
late.
of
Yeah.
Raikkonen there.
Braking for the corner, mate. 'Cause I'm in too deep and I'm trying to keep.
He was really in too deep at that point.
Yeah, he's scared
You
of
know,
going under the back of Raikkonen's diffuser there.
Hey.
if he was any further in too deep, he'd get a fat lip.
Yeah.
But
And that's over my head.
Moving
sadly,
on.
no number 41 on the grid this season.
Oh.
What was I saying? Yeah, we were talking about.
You could probably sum it together, you know.
I could try it. But yeah, we were talking about the dominance of Mercedes in this period compared to, the dominance that we've seen from other teams and other drivers. Like even throwing it back to the sort of early noughties with the performance of Michael Schumacher in the Ferrari just being the class of the
Mm.
field. But more recently, Max Verstappen being the class of the field as well. This in this era, we've got two very good, very evenly matched drivers extracting the maximum performance out of the car week on, week out, and making it a challenge for either driver. Is that what the key difference is between like those other eras as to why we don't, go, oh, but they were just too dominant,
I think so. I
Yeah,
think. Oh,
I'll
so
go on,
carry on,
Owain.
George. No, no,
Well, I
carry
mean,
on.
One of you's got to take it.
I'll do it. I'll do it. Yeah. So I mean, one team being dominant's not that uncommon in Formula One. You look back at the history of it, like you said, Ferrari in the early 2000s with Schumacher, McLaren in the late 80s, early 90s, Red Bull at times very recently too, Mercedes for a very, very long time at the start of the V6 era. It's not something that's uncommon. We just want to see entertaining racing, and there's there's different Formula One fans that have different needs. Like I think we're on the same category where it's like this is so entertaining because even though there's two guys at the front, miles ahead of each other, they're still battling with each other, and we're seeing guys go side by side like we are right now with Bottas and
Yeah.
Raikkonen.
Great move
Um,
on the inside here. But again, turn 11. It is an overtaking opportunity back in this era. Carry on.
yeah, they got DRS going into there, and it's doing its job. But at the end of the day, we're fine seeing the battles for 10th, 11th, or whatever. We want entertaining racing. But there's some people that think, well, the same guy's winning every week, so it's not very fun. So it's a tough one at the end of the day. But if things would eventually close up, Mercedes' advantage would close up a little bit, because they just got out the trap so fast. I mean, Rosberg's went on record. I'm sure he said after Australia, just like, yeah, I could have lapped the field if I wanted to, but we were just coasting basically. Because like nowadays, you need 4, 5 engines at this time for the whole season. Now it's like 3 or 4 or whatever. So it was very much an economy run when you were that far ahead. I mean, look at the gaps now, 34 seconds between Hamilton and Perez in third. Um,
I think there were other reasons that he didn't lap the field, George. I seem to remember that Paddy Lowe's come out and said that Mercedes was so dominant with their not just the engine, but with their aerodynamic package, but particularly the engine. It must have been a percentage points better
mm,
than the other teams, and they actually didn't want to press the advantage too much for fear of the engine formula being changed or altered in a way that didn't benefit them. Mercedes were very, very conscious that there was a bit of intelligence there with wanting to maintain that as long as possible. So not using all of the power of the engine at any point, not wanting to show their hand too much in some ways.
mm,
For fear of regulation taking their performance advantage away, as we've seen in many, many Formula One seasons, and have seen, fans calling out for it in other seasons where, the team that they don't like is the one that's got the advantage. And we want to see teams fighting against each other. We want to see, races where any one of, eight, maybe even any one of all 20 drivers, as utopian and as fantasy as that would be, we want to be going into race weekends with those variables and with the chance for anybody to, pull off a Sergio Perez, pull off a Pastor Maldonado and win in the most unlikely of circumstances. But the teams have got to be there and the teams have got to be able to perform in those scenarios. And, if a team underperforms, doesn't deliver the package that they should do, that's really on the team to fix rather than the sport to, govern and, peg other teams back. But of course, we do want a fair sport. We want, the level playing field. The budget cap, in my eyes, I think does a
mm.
better job of doing that. I think as well, holding teams to account with that too. As we get some team ready from Lewis Hamilton. They are 30 seconds ahead and they are lifting and coasting to
Yeah.
save fuel.
So
Oh,
I'm looking at the flexi wing there. I know it's a bit more prominent on the Red Bull there than it is on on the Williams that they're fighting, because obviously it's painted in black. But it makes me laugh that was just all of that about flexi wings went away. It was so weird how it went away just immediately after. Red Bull weren't so dominant anymore. No one seemed to care. They were just cared about the Mercedes with its engine. I
Yeah,
will
because
say
you
actually,
can see it moving like really clearly there, can't you? Because of
yeah,
just the
yeah.
pattern on it. Go on,
Yeah,
Owen.
yeah. I was going to say one thing I was just thinking about when you were talking about how obviously you don't want teams to be pegged back because they've done a better job. Is maybe that's a case in favour of having the separation of power with F1 and the regulatory body, the FIA. I know obviously we don't like the FIA for various reasons right now, um, but but the actual sort of the conflict of interest is taken away from a regulatory perspective. I would say just there's a benefit to having the FIA be making the rules and F1 be the commercial body, because obviously if the commercial body is making the rules, then you could foresee a scenario where it does get boring, or one team is being quote unquote too dominant, and the rules are changed to try and slow them down. And I'm not saying that's going to stop happening because people have conversations and things like that. But on the other hand, I think there's a little bit of a checks and balances there. So maybe there's an argument in favour of having that separation as the Force India Perez overtakes the Ferrari
How
with
many times
ease.
is Fernando Alonso going to get passed by a Force India in this race? I bet he's sick of the sight of that colour scheme, as jubilant as we were to see it again at the start of this race.
He
It's about
probably
to
is.
disappear into the distance
Oh,
for him, unfortunately.
Oh,
there we
we
go.
see a Caterham.
The Renault engine Caterham. Renault did a really poor job, and that looks like unless that he's hit someone or something like that. That looks like a reliability issue.
I think it's more likely a reliability issue, based on the context of Formula One at this point. And as you say, just Renault as
Mm.
well, just not having that reliability. As we see cars jumping into the pit lane, this was a very common sight, when we saw cars parked up on and we still see it now, the potential for a safety car and the boost that you can get just from pitting at the right time behind that. Um, and we have the debate, or at least I bring the debate up almost every time of, like, should have stopped behind the pit stop, like count towards your allocation of stops, because of course these drivers have to make a mandatory tire check. They have to run both tires that are available to them during this race. It's a requirement of the rules, and it brings in strategy. It makes the cars less, it makes the races themselves a bit more unpredictable. But when you see that there's not as much of a difference between the mediums and the hards, the primes and the options as they were referring to them, it just gives you a bit more freedom because you're not going to have as much of a penalty by going to that harder compound tire.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of excitement, and it should count towards it at the end of the day. I remember they used to close the pit lane quite regularly when safety cars came out. If you want to see some interesting shenanigans with that, back and watch the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix. A lot of penalties handed out there and a lot of questionable tactics. We'll leave it at that, though. But yeah, it should do. I mean, this is of course. I mean, this is the pre-VSC era as well. So if the safety car was going to come out, it was the full-on safety car. There was no halfway house with the VSC. So that's why you'll see a lot more yellow flags like this rather than, because that'd be a VSC nowadays, 100% with car out on track. But they usually do hesitate to bring out the full safety car because it does. This cannon will change the race, as Murray Walker used to say back in the day.
This cannon will change the race. Fantastic. Yeah, and the marshals have already cleared that Caterham as well. So, if we'd seen like a full safety car come out for that, they've already resolved it within basically a racing lap. But, some really
So
good
slow off the
marshals in
corner.
Formula One. They are really slow off the corner, aren't they? As we see that Red Bull and the Ferrari fighting, might we see a move here from that Red Bull? Is he going to go around the outside?
He is.
He does go around the outside.
Ricardo
Daniel
keeps it in.
Ricciardo ahead of Kimi Raikkonen. That driver is only, what, 3 seasons into Formula One? Started off with HRT, before moving over to the Toro Rosso team and then jumping straight up with the departure of Mark Webber into that lead Red Bull seat. And fully deserving that seat for the remaining few seasons that he will stay there too.
Gonna have a go at K-Mag here as well.
Oh,
Oh,
my
look at him
goodness
flying
me.
off the corner.
Beautiful from Daniel Ricciardo there.
Although the power of the Mercedes engine, even with DRS, like he struggled to get past. There's something. I
Is it
don't. I
because
don't
he
think there's.
had the DRS from that Lotus ahead of him?
It may
So
well have been. Maybe. Yeah.
I think they both had DRS there, yeah.
yeah.
Oh my God. Pastor Maldonado, what a legend. Still the most recent driver to win a Grand Prix in a Williams,
Goodness me.
2012.
Yeah. God, that's
We've got to fix that stat, surely.
13 years ago.
Like, come on, Alex Albon, come on, Carlos Sainz, come on, James Vowles, give us something in 2025, and take away that stat, please.
It was such a shocking win that the garage just self-immolated after the race.
Couldn't deal with it. Something had to go wrong for Williams that weekend,
Yeah.
instead of just everything going wrong for Lewis Hamilton in 2012. I've been rewatching 2011, and Lewis Hamilton has an. What are we seeing a replay of here? Oh, this is Sebastian Vettel with a similar move to what we saw from his teammate on the McLaren just a few laps ago. Um,
It's probably quite good
Beautiful.
in the Renault right at that time because it had so little power. You could just put your foot down, and you didn't have to worry about spinning up the rear wheels.
Makes the tires last longer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, I've been watching 2011 recently, and as we see, will something stop happening in this race so I can just talk? But Daniel Ricciardo making a move on the Ferrari, absolutely, round the outside, as we say. Just a great move in general. And Fernando Alonso being passed by another Force India into turn 11. Um,
That's
Oh.
that's four by my count.
that's four. As we see the Williams of, is that Felipe Massa pitting? Yes, from P4. His teammates already managed to get back ahead of him, like having stopped those laps earlier. Or maybe the Massa is just pitting the third time around a bit too soon, or a bit sooner than his teammate was. But yeah, 2011, Lewis Hamilton has an absolutely horrible run in that McLaren Mercedes. Disqualified from certain races, constantly fighting with Felipe Massa. If Lewis Hamilton was passing any car or hitting any car, it would be Felipe Massa. Um, but 2011, it's gone to the history books now. This is of course where we start to see, the record-breaking Lewis Hamilton Mercedes run, like, start to happen.
Yeah, I remember
Spoilers.
2020. Yeah, I think people are aware he's won one or two championships. But yeah, I remember. Honestly, 2011 was unfortunately for Hamilton. That was his banter era because I think he was just so tired of the McLaren not being very good that he just took out all his anger on Felipe Massa. That I'm sure at Silverstone they were battling and Hamilton just drove purely into the side of him into the last corner and was just like, I'm taking your
Yep.
Just
place, Massa.
ran him straight off the circuit at club.
Did he even get a penalty for that?
I don't think he did. I'm not sure.
I don't remember. But
By the
then
way, the Mercedes haven't stopped. They've only had one stop, and the rest have had two, but they've got a stop in hand. Sorry.
It's ridiculous.
with 17 laps to go as well on these tires, they're still going around. Are they on the same tire compounds as well as each other at this point?
I
It's
think
I
been
it.
so
don't
long since
Yeah.
we've
think
seen
they
either
are.
of them. Um,
I think with what happens later on, I think one of the key things is that Rosberg's on the primes, the mediums, the white wall ones, and Hamilton is on the softs. So Hamilton needs to run the mediums at some point, whereas Rosberg does not because he's used both because they start on the softs. But yeah, you're right. It's been so long since we sit with they're somewhere on the track, but nowhere near anybody else.
it's very reminiscent of some of Max Verstappen's coverage of the last few seasons. Sebastian Vettel Team Radio. So they're going for a counter strategy to try and, get some positions towards the end of that and just get Sebastian Vettel some momentum once again. In qualifying on the Saturday, he missed the session's final. No,
Oh,
he. Oh,
Oh, here we go.
is this where we see the Sauber and the Lotus
yeah,
coming
looks
together
like
out
it.
of the pits?
Oh yes.
That
Um,
looks like that's rolled over.
that looks like that's rolled over. We're gonna see a replay soon, so that my voice can stop, building up the tension, using all of those techniques. Um, this car looks absolutely shattered to pieces here, as we also see Manisha Kaltenborn, not necessarily the best representation of women in Formula One, but representation of women in Formula One.
I was going to
Um,
say she's the only female Formula One team principal, right?
I think at this point we don't have Claire Williams as well. I guess she was the co/deputy team principal, Claire Williams.
Yeah, I think she was. Yeah, unfortunately, that's so
Yeah.
effectively. So right, so okay. Well, I'll put it this way. So officially, yes, but
As we
in
see a replay here.
So here we
but
go.
So there's the Lotus coming out of the pits,
oh,
and Gutierrez just turns in. Does Gutierrez have the right to the line there, or is that the Lotus?
I think that's a racing incident. Like, what can? Oh, you know what?
It's past Maldonado, bear in mind.
No, we don't change our opinions based off who the driver is. But on the other hand, I do think if you're the, yeah, no,
Well, the question you have to ask yourself is where is Maldonado gonna go there? And is you might
Yeah,
say that well he's coming out of the pits, he's coming out on cold tires. Maybe he wouldn't have made the cut. It's impossible to tell. I think he would have made it for what it's worth. Unfortunately, Gutierrez just did not see him and did not expect him to be there, and over he went. And
yeah.
there's the safety car.
There's the safety car. So the pack is going to be bunched up. I don't think at this point lapped runners are allowed to feed themselves through and catch up to the back of the crocodile, as we'd call it. But I could be misremembering here because I know that in a few seasons earlier, there is still that, the lapped runners being in amongst the pack and ultimately
bloody hell,
just
that's swinging about a lot. Sorry,
that is swinging
Mm,
about
yeah.
swinging about a
that's
lot.
probably not. That's probably not light either. Like that would hurt a lot if you got hit by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be hit by that if I was a marshal not wearing any form of like, pain PPE on the heads. Um, but yeah, so the race is going to be neutralized. All the cars are going to now bunch up together. Have we seen any cars enter the pits? I think we've seen one or two.
But,
Um,
not.
Oh,
Oh,
as we
McLaren
see the
off.
oh,
McLaren parking up. Is
yeah.
that Jensen Button or is
Yeah.
that's
Oh no,
Kevin
it's
Magnussen?
Magnussen. Kevin, yeah, Kevin Magnussen. I forgot that Jensen Button had the pink helmet at this time. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, no, something's expired in the turbo. You can see it coming out the airbox there.
Yeah, so once again, proving the Mercedes aren't, the Mercedes engines themselves, Lewis Hamilton had that retirement before the race really started in Australia, of course. They're not impervious, but they're just really blooming quick.
Hmm.
But
I think they were
yeah,
better. Oh, Hamilton's pit.
Hamilton's pitting, Hamilton's putting on the harder white marked tires,
Oh,
changing from those mediums.
they double stacked.
They double stacked. Fantastic. And as you can see, yeah, Nico Rosberg was running those harder tires and is now putting on the softer, yellow marked, medium compound tires. Um, so all of a sudden now Lewis Hamilton leading the way on the slower, marginally slower, as Mercedes have said earlier in this race, medium on harder tires is championship rival Nico Rosberg behind him on the quicker yellow marked tires. What's going through people's heads at this current point? Like surely this is Nico Rosberg's race now.
Oh
You
yeah,
think so with that, but Hamilton's got good old track position. So
yeah. I mean, he does, but then again, it's 14 laps to go. Um, the harder tires are slower, though not as slow as we thought in comparison. You thought there's no real way that Hamilton's going to be able to keep Rosberg behind because he's got slower tires on. That's the thing. I think the lap runners have been let through, or either that or they pit from behind the safety car there.
Yeah,
Because
we
otherwise,
we have seen quite a few drivers pitting under the safety car, which I think as well is why we're not seeing just as much of a crocodile as of yet. There is certainly a lap runner because there is currently not a Lotus running in P3, whilst being third on the track behind the safety car. That being Grosjean or Maldonado, I'm gonna guess, as we see another replay of that turn one incident.
I think if you're Maldonado there, you have to expect that Gutierrez is like he would, as the car behind, he would have seen him turning in. Gutierrez couldn't
Hmm.
see a thing at that point. Like he's way ahead, whereas Pastor Maldonado can see the Sauber there. Oh, that's
That
very
just looks
violent.
so violent. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think it's
that
probably the stiffness of the car. Like, okay, from beyond this point, Gutierrez can't see him. Like, what? So what's he meant to do? Like, avoid a car that he doesn't know if it's going to be there?
yeah, I see what you're saying. But
I'd like to see Pastor Maldonado's viewpoint on it, but
Yeah, I think it would be good to see a point of view of the Lotus perspective, but just from the the T-cam view for the Sauber, it does look like, you know, there's clear track, but of course we can't see what's visible in the mirrors. And, the narrative is, as we see Guido van der
Guido.
Gaard, of course, causing some driver drama for the Sauber team at other points in the F1 seasons. Um,
Not
yeah,
really his fault.
not really his fault. As we've said. But yeah, just absolutely mad. But it would be good to see that Maldonado perspective, I think, of that incident. But yeah, as we can see, Hamilton on the mediums, Rosberg on the softs, Perez on the mediums, Hulkenberg on the mediums, Button on the mediums, the two Red Bulls on the softs, Massa and Bottas on the mediums, and I think the rest of the top 10 as well were on the harder medium tyres. Um, yeah. Lap cars made
oh,
out of
Charlie
overtake, so
Whiting.
there we go. Oh, and yeah, Charlie Whiting, Rick 2, a legend of Formula One. Um, Good old Charlie Whiting, absolutely. So yeah, 13 laps to go as we're seeing Kimi Raikkonen just running around in what looks like a very grimy front Ferrari wing. Is that just from the pickup? Is that from the dust in the air? Is that just what general race, scrubbiness that comes just from driving around?
Yeah, I
Lot.
mean, you'd be surprised how much grime a car picks up just
Mm.
driving about, even for a couple of hours. Even though it's quite a dry area. I mean, obviously, if you watch any endurance racing, you know that give it a
Yeah.
couple of hours and any car looks pretty, very dirty, particularly if it's been raining.
Yeah.
Um,
Wait, Owain, do you watch endurance racing?
you know what? Sometimes
You should
I
have
may
said.
watch a bit of endurance racing. Funnily enough, actually, you're talking about the sounds of the cars. Sort of. I remember at the time when these first came in, this era of cars. I was fairly used to it because they sound like sort of 2014 era. Um, had the World Endurance Championship at the time and had hybrids for a couple of years, and so they sounded actually fairly similar. Um, it was sort of that convergence towards hybrid motorsport that we'd sort of seen. And I'll be honest with you, part of me didn't really know what anyone was going on about. I was just like, yeah, it doesn't sound like the V8s, but they also don't sound terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I think this like safety car period is probably a good time to just, have some conversations about Formula One in general. And like, yeah, for me, that 2014 shift to the turbo hybrid V6 is I didn't really um have that much of a like, why are people making such a big difference about this? Why are they trying to stick funnels on the back of exhaust to try and make the cars louder? Like, what's that really going to add to it? Formula One changes, Formula One modernizes, and all of it was for, the long-term benefit of Formula One and giving it some more relevance to, the way of life that we were seeing almost. And I think that's something that F1 always needs to make sure it keeps itself with. We always like, I think if we saw F1 cars go back to like, refueling and like just guzzling, gasoline and stuff, it's how I think we would see Formula One go extinct almost, or become back in that niche model almost of, being the sport that is in there and just is taking place, but is not, the mainstream element that it is nowadays. What do you think about this?
I think you're right. I think Formula One had to do it as well, because there was talk at the time. Obviously, we lost Cosworth after 2013. They weren't prepared to do the hybrid engines, but Mercedes and Renault were very much saying, look, if you don't modernize, if you don't make this more relevant to hybrid technology, we're going to leave. So you would have just had Ferrari and Cosworth, which I'm sure a lot of older Formula One fans will be like, oh, it's great. That's like the 70s and 80s. But Formula One needs to change. It needs to move with the times, and you can people question it. People said this is going to be the death of Formula One. Formula One's never going to recover. The show is terrible. The cars are unreliable. People were saying this is going to be the end of it. Now look at F1. It's more popular than it ever has been, bar no era. So you can't say it's not been a success.
Yeah, I think there's negatives to that in some ways. I think for Mercedes got an awful lot to say apparently in the engine formula. I mean, it helped that they'd been working on it apparently since since they saw that it wasn't going to be particularly performant. They weren't going to get to the front with the chassis side in the time they had as the Turn 1 incident that we're talking about comes under investigation. Hopefully, we get a resolution in the next 12 laps on that. Important team radio message there
Team
from Hamilton.
orders.
Very
Yeah,
important team. Is that a
well,
team order? That just seems to be a keep it
Yeah.
safe, keep it clean, and bring the cars home.
Yeah.
yeah, that's what it seems like.
Yeah, and of course,
Uh,
team orders allowed in Formula One as well after the 2010 incident between the two Ferraris of Fernando being faster than Felipe Massa. In this particular race, Fernando is slower than you, particularly if you're driving a Force India. But Felipe Massa, of course, not driving a Force India in this race. Um, but yeah, the relevance of Formula One at the moment is, you know, staggering, and the value that that then has on the sport as well as we get some more team radio. S- So both Mercedes getting the same team instruction of, bring the cars home. I think that's the most crucial bit of information there,
Yeah,
really.
that's don't run into each other, isn't it? That's the head honchos at Mercedes. Toto Wolff and Niki Lauda and Paddy and James Folson that knowing that right we're about to we've got two drivers incredibly motivated and then a 10 lap sprint to the end. Like we just don't throw it away.
Yeah, don't throw it away. You've been 30 seconds ahead of the rest of the field for almost half the race, almost the entire race. Just, bring it home. Bring us that 25 and 18 points. No point for a fastest lap in this current era of Formula One, as we see lots of, just discarded rubber on that straight that we were just looking at. I think there was a tear off visor floating around, and the safety car is in this lap. So what we're going to see is the safety car driven by Bernd Mailander, tearing off. We'll see Lewis Hamilton controlling the pace of the field. He can't, erratically go and stop. He's got to keep it a consistent pace. But the real question will be, will he just, launch it out of that final corner, or will he try and, go at a time when his teammate might not be expecting it? Of course, he knows he's on the slower tires right now, and he's gone, I think. I think he's already gone coming into that final corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, just talk me through this, George. What's going on right now as we see the Mercedes just darting ahead?
Yeah, so Hamilton unleashed the power just before the end of the final corner. Rosberg trying to shape and trying to get past, can't quite get alongside. The Force Indias are fighting
Oh,
each other.
Oh, he
incredible.
steamed up the inside there.
That is not bringing the car home for those two, but they've managed to keep it clear. And the Mercedes are going side by side again into the
It's so.
second braking zone.
Rosberg trying to go around the outside. Once again, Lewis Hamilton
Oh,
pushing me as wide as he possibly can within the rules.
they basically run him out of road.
Elbows were firmly out there.
Elbows firmly out, and talk about trying to bring it home. They're trying to bring it home as quickly as possible. Look at the gap they're building to the Force Indians already. Like we've barely made it through sector one. We're just coming, you
Ah,
know,
camera shot.
they're out of camera shot already, and a 10-second stop go penalty for Pastor Maldonado for causing a collision.
That's a huge penalty as well. That's a race ender because he's got to come in, he's got to stop for 10 seconds, and then he's got to go back out again
Yeah,
without any
and
work
that's all
being done
with
on the car.
10 laps to go, and he's got to do that within passing the start finish line for another two times. I think he's got to do it before he would pass it for a third time. So,
Well,
yeah,
Vettel and Ricardo are on it.
Yeah, the Red Bulls have instantly, like now that they've been brought back into the picture again, they've just passed Jenson Button as we see this gap at the front just getting bigger still. But the two by two behind that, the lone McLaren of Jenson Button in P6, P7, um,
Oh, here we go.
P7, I would say, as Rosberg lines up another move.
No DRS. Oh, okay. No, he doesn't send it in there. I thought he might do.
He's going to position himself for the next braking zone, though. That's going to be key.
Yeah,
Hamilton,
No
fastest
DRS, but he's
lap.
got the slipstream. It's great teammate battles. They're all line astern pretty much, are the teams, apart from the Williams just there breaking each other up because passing Jenson Button.
Hamilton
Ham
saying he's got no power whilst he's on the slower, harder tires.
Look at the
You know,
brake dust coming off that. Sorry, I was looking at the brake dust off the McLaren.
Yeah, as the other Williams of Valtteri Bottas makes it ahead of Jenson Button now. Felipe Massa making it ahead of Valtteri Bottas during all of this that's been going on. Pastor Maldonado serves his stop-go penalty, and he's
Ooh,
still ahead of Jules Bianchi, who I
Don't know
believe
what
is
happened
currently
there.
last of the
that
runners.
was a torpedo move right there from Kvyat.
I don't know what happened there.
Just came
Yeah.
out of nowhere.
The precursor to Daniel Kvyat in his torpedo era.
Oh, is that the Ferrari overtaking a McLaren?
The Ferrari's trying to
Button's
overtake the
got a problem.
McLaren.
So,
Yeah, he's driving a
Look at the
McLaren.
brake dust.
That's
Unfortunately, you're right.
That is the problem. McLaren just not, keeping pace with the front running teams in terms of development. And, Mercedes, of course, having the advantage of being able to develop their car, knowing how the engine is going to sit within it, versus McLaren being the customer team, ultimately prompting that move to Honda as Fernando Alonso has another look up the inside of
oh,
Jenson Button.
lock up.
Tiny little lock up there going into the final corner.
Hamilton's
Rosberg
extended the
losing
gap to
hey,
about a
half a second.
second.
Yeah, but crucially, Rosberg's still within that DRS zone. Um, at the moment, though, we don't have that DRS run up to turn four, up to the top of the hill. We've only got it on the main straight and the inner straight after turn 10.
Another fastest lap for Hamilton on that last lap.
And DRS enabled now, crucially.
Mm. You've seen, did you notice the gas dust? 8 seconds between Hamilton, the
Eight
leader, and
seconds.
Perez. It's been 2 laps. 4 seconds a lap.
Like, they're just kind of like, no, we want that 30-second lead that we had beforehand. Give us it back.
I think they're going to need it.
Wow, incredible.
Oh, that's a big lockup.
Oh,
Oh, a huge lockup.
that's
Obviously,
going to be a vibration.
it's the unloaded tyre, but still.
Yeah, that very much of a lock up there, turning that tire into a 50 pence piece to steal another Martin Brundle phrase. Can you tell almost all of my Formula One experience has been Martin Brundle commentating on it? I'm hugging these references like my favorite granny.
Oh my goodness.
It'll be a very sad day when he leaves Formula One.
It
Hopefully not
really
for a
will
long
be.
time.
Like the frequency that look, there's no cars in the background of that shot as we see the
Oh, there we go.
Mercedes. That's insane. But yeah, like the increased frequency as Rosberg sets the fastest lap this time around. Where we see Martin Brundle maybe
Oh, the
taking
Red
a race
Bulls.
off. Daniel Ricciardo there going around the outside of, well, the inside of, Sebastian Vettel to make the move into turn one.
He's got to defend up against him for turn four, though.
Yeah, I think he's going to have it though because he's got that inside line. He can just position the car where he needs to make Sebastian Vettel a little bit slower through that corner. But, they're sharing the same piece of track. And this is what George was saying, just as we had that restart of, teams two by two, it's so easy to just trip each other up then and just wipe each other out and, ruin what has, been a good race for the Force Indias. One of them's potentially going to be on the podium here as we
Another
see
lockup.
another lockup from the Red Bull there. And there's a yellow flag for something going on in this circuit too. Could be a driver that's pulled off, could be some debris. Um,
Half a second between the Mercedes. Rosberg might be in range to make an attack this lap coming up.
Yeah, as we see a replay of the Red Bull of Daniel Ricciardo forcing his way past Sebastian Vettel. A good move from Daniel Ricciardo. I think you'll both agree there.
Absolutely. That's just the Renault engine, mate. Get on with it.
Yeah, that is unfortunately just the Renault engine as we see Jenson Button going even further back now. The safety car has not been good for that McLaren who, as we saw earlier in this race, has been using less fuel seemingly. Maybe he's just heavier because he's got so much fuel remaining.
And he can't turn up the wick because the engine's going to blow up otherwise.
He's
Yeah.
got a Mercedes. He should be able to do it.
Well, his teammates already shown, that, the Mercedes engine isn't, perfect and can still have problems. Um, as we see the Red Bulls on the back of that Force India of Nico Hulkenberg now too.
It's that soft tyres. The Red Bulls have got softs on and everybody else is on
Oh,
mediums.
Oh,
So,
that's
that,
why there's
that
a
look
yellow.
at
that's the
that
yellow
debris.
flag. That's
That'll
not some
make it a
de
move on Ricardo.
That's not
Max
some
out.
debris you want to just like casually drive over either. As we see another lockup from I think both Red Bulls there.
My
It's
word, how are
probably
they
it's got
not
to be
crashing into each other?
it's got to be dirty air, hasn't it? It's got to be because they're sat in the dirty air. Less of it in this era of car, but
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
Yeah,
I'm
looks
just
like it's
letting the
again.
racing talk, I think, at this point. This is some like the last 10 can all races, just have like a last 10 race, a 10 lap sprint. Um
Yeah, they should do a sprint race. That'd be a
yeah,
great idea in Formula
that
One.
that'd be a fantastic idea.
I can't believe
Definitely
you're doing
bringing
this to me right now.
bringing
Oh, as
oh, as we
Rosberg sends
see
it down.
like
Hamilton
surely at
hangs
this
around the
point now.
outside.
How is Hamilton just getting so much grip on the outside on those harder tires as well?
I don't know how he's managed it. Like,
He's going to try again. Round the outside.
I don't know how he's managed it on that
Wheel to
outside.
wheel.
Oh,
Once again, just pushing him
Oh,
wide at turn
how?
four.
he squeezed him off the circuit, but
It
you
was
know,
legal back then, almost, really. You know,
well, yeah. And I think even if the stewards did get involved, it's he squeezed him off the circuit, but also let him back. He let him back on. So
yeah. Wow, and you see like Rosberg making those adjustments on the steering wheel. Like when you're racing so wheel to wheel, like how do you even find the time to make those tiny adjustments? Like we hear it on the radio every now and then, like just from a driver being like, "Please don't talk to me. I'm too
Let it go.
busy."
Yeah, the skill these guys have to drive these cars at this speed, being thrown around for over an hour and a half, making adjustments all the time on the steering wheel. I mean, I'm sure they get used to it to an extent, but when you think about it, it's just like how,
Yeah.
it's illegal to drive with your mobile phone, but they're adjusting things constantly on. It's like they've got a tablet in front of them, isn't it? It's incredible what they're doing.
Yeah, unless you're driving the Williams, because of course they've still got the dash mount. The bane of my life for the Formula One games until 2024 when they finally, modernized and took it off that dashboard. As we
Oh,
see
Rosberg
Rosberg
down the
making another
inside.
move.
Hamilton's got the cutback.
Yeah, Hamilton's got the better line there because Rosberg just wanted to make that move happen into turn one, but just went a little bit too deep
He's got the slipstream here, though. Hamilton defending to the inside.
and doing
Is he
some
gonna?
recharging too, as we saw from the flashing red light.
Hmm. Rosberg trying to cut him back. But is he going to have enough pace? He's trying Hamilton positioning his car perfectly.
Jenson Button is now in P11 behind both Ferraris. He's out of the points.
Oh,
Poor
oh,
JB. But
been a
yeah,
terrible race for
Every
McLaren.
every corner is an overtaking opportunity if you want it hard enough.
Yeah.
how badly does Nico Rosberg want this though? Like Lewis Hamilton, he's won the last race. Nico Rosberg won the first one. You know, Lewis Hamilton, he's pulling in the gap that Nico Rosberg was not necessarily gifted, but claimed in that first race of the season where Lewis Hamilton didn't get any points whatsoever. You know, Nico Rosberg, if Lewis Hamilton wins this, the gap again comes down by a further 7 seconds. Like
7 points.
se exactly 7 points, not seconds. Can you imagine if we were dealing with F1 in seconds?
Oh
What
Ah,
would they,
God.
what if they gave out points like that instead? Like
yeah.
how many seconds you?
How many seconds you lead by gets you the amount of points?
It'd be like the Tour de France.
I swear I heard that Bernie once wanted to put a medal system in Formula One. Whoever wins the most races gets the most medals, and you just win that way instead of points. And it's like, Bernie, come on, man.
I
What are
mean,
you doing?
let's be honest, he's the commercial guy. Like, he's all about ideas. He probably just watched
Yeah,
watched the
lots of
Olympics at one
Sprinklers
ideas.
point.
at races. As
No,
Ricardo gets up into P4, passing Nico Hulkenberg for, or is
I
that
think it
Sergio
is.
Perez? I think that is Nico Hulkenberg.
I don't
Great
quite
move.
know. I was more transfixed by the dash, which you see the Mercedes with its big screen and stuff, so you can
Oh
make
yeah,
those
the
settings
Red Bull also has
changes.
it too at this point.
Well, no. The Red Bull, look, the Red Bull there hasn't got.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
compared
got
to
the
what I was
dash
saying
mount.
earlier,
Oh yeah, no, it's got the dash mount.
Peter
Overtake mode.
Bono there telling us to use overtake mode.
Oh, I'm gonna miss Bono and Hamilton this season being together.
Such an
Yeah,
iconic duo, like as I say, I've been watching 2011 and having Peter Bonington being Michael Schumacher's race engineer,
Of course,
is
yeah.
is such a whiplash.
Oh, fell almost into the back of Hulkenberg there.
Almost collecting the Force India. That's not what the Force India needs, having had such a good race so far, passing Fernando Alonso 17 times.
I know Peter
Oh,
Bonington didn't obviously have a hand in Michael Schumacher's World Championships, but he's worked with two drivers who between them have 13 World Championships, and
when
he's
yeah.
partially responsible for six of them.
The real secret behind the success. Um,
Bono.
yeah.
Actually, 14. It's sorry, by my logic, it's 14. I'm being silly. Sorry.
Were you accounting a title that hadn't actually been won there or something?
No. I don't know why. I just discounted the McLaren World Championship that Lewis Hamilton got. I don't know why, because by my logic, it didn't work that way. But
See, don't try and apply logic to situations in Formula One. It never works.
oh yeah. Is that the message we're taking out of this? Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the message we're taking. It certainly takes the blame away from you. Um, as we see, the Williams now down to P7 and 8. They were driving around. There was a podium on the cards for the Williams at one point, but just the Red Bulls going for the right tire at the right time. Sergio Perez.
Ricciardo.
Yeah, Ricky. There is an I in his name. There is an I in his name.
Ricciardo.
I, was it me or did that race engineer sound like GP?
He did a bit actually.
I'm not sure he did. I'm not sure he was, but he was definitely. You know,
Yeah,
you can imagine that they went to the same school or something.
GP being Giampiero Lambiase, Max Verstappen's current race engineer in 2025. I think he was at Force
Oh,
India, if I'm right.
I'm looking it up now.
bad to
Yeah.
worse for Jensen
Jensen
Button.
Button retiring, it looks like. He's going very slowly at the very least. And I don't think that's just a case of the Mercedes have like got around to
That
just lap
was
him.
that was GP, Owain. He
Oh, was
was
it?
Perez's race engineer in 2014.
Wow.
What a call, mate! Wow.
Incredible. As we see the Williams trying to get back ahead of Sebastian Vettel there. Is he going to maybe get it on the cutback? Running up to turn four. DRS in the modern era of Formula One right now. But is
Oh, he's pushed him.
Oh,
Oh, goodness me.
must
Vettel
have leave
defending
his
for his
space.
life.
All the time you have to leave it in space. What was that?
Oh,
It
sorry,
worked though.
it's worked?
apologies for the noises I'm making, but Jesus.
Oh my god.
He squeezed him and then he got him on the cutback. Goodness me.
Yeah, but it's cost him a lot of time to Nico Hulkenberg ahead of him. That gap is now 1.7 seconds. Is this the softer tires like maybe running off, or is this the Mercedes versus the Williams engine? Because you can see the Ferrari in the picture too here.
I think it could be because to be honest, we're seeing. Oh, there we go. And
Now we're
there's the
seeing
McLaren.
Jensen Button pulling
Well,
into
we're
the
seeing
garage now,
Jensen
aren't
Button retire, yeah,
we?
but no, we no. If you look at the gap between Hamilton and Rosberg, it's increasing there. It's over a second now, so it seems like we're on the final lap. Things seem to have solidified.
Yeah, things are steadying. The softer medium compound tire seemingly, or is it the softer tire? I'm not sure at this point now. This is why we need to just keep to soft, medium, and hard. It's ridiculous.
I
You
think the
know,
soft is
what's
softer and
next?
the
A
medium
hyper
is
soft
harder.
tire? But yeah, we're just seeing, it's reached the final lap now. Um, the tires themselves, although, Rosberg is closing a little bit on Hamilton by 2/10 of a second there, Owain.
I still maintain I'm right. It's the final lap of the race. Like that could be going through a DRS zone or something like that.
Exactly, it could be. As we see the two Williams, Linus Stern, Valtteri Bottas behind Felipe Massa. But yeah, that gap now at the front, 22 seconds between the Mercedes and Sergio Perez in P3. Very much looking. Oh, is this Perez and Daniel Ricciardo potentially?
It is.
Who, they GP sounded very confident that, Ricciardo wasn't going to catch them. As he maybe lulled his driver into a false sense of security. Might we see a Red Bull on the podium in this final lap?
So
Oh, I mean,
close
it's
between
close.
these
Oh,
guys.
it's
Look at
quite
that.
close. I'm just thinking, it's what 22 seconds between the Mercedes
They
and the
should be
rest of
crossing
the.
the line around now, shouldn't they?
Well,
They are.
There
and
we
as,
go.
and as
And
you call
across
it,
the line, Lewis Hamilton, P1. Look at that fist pump. Nico Rosberg, P2, just behind him. Class of the field from the Mercedes. A thumbs up there between the two teammates. And a much younger and happier looking Toto Wolff. You know, at this point, I think maybe they didn't have so many headsets to spare. They hadn't won all of those titles yet. And across the line, just ahead of Daniel Ricciardo in the Red Bull, is Sergio Perez for P3 for that Force India team. Sahara Force India, of course, crossing the line. That's a great result for the Force India teams, as we see the rest of the gaggle crossing the line too.
we saw that slightly sarcastic celebration from
That's what you
So
were
Fernando
looking at
happy.
Alonso
for,
there.
wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. What an awful race for Ferrari. What an awful race for McLaren, but incredible one for Mercedes and Force India and Red Bull. Great results for all those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, to give ourselves a little bit of some form of like review here, like as Hamilton's getting, let's listen to this. Yeah, very much still holding on to it to the end there for Lewis Hamilton's side of the garage. Yeah, so I guess the final classification then, of course, is Lewis Hamilton P1, Nico Rosberg P2, Sergio Perez rounding off the podium 24 seconds back in P3, Daniel Ricciardo P4, Nico Hulkenberg P5, Sebastian Vettel P6. Felipe Massa in seventh, Valtteri Bottas in P8 for the other Williams, Fernando Alonso and Kimi Räikkönen rounding out the top 10, P9 and P10 respectively. Danny Kvyat, the first of the non-point scorers in P11 for the Toro Rosso, Roman Grosjean P12, Max Chilton in P13 for the Marussia Ferrari, Pastor Maldonado P14, Kamui Kobayashi in the Caterham for P15, Jules Bianchi in P16, the last of the classified runners. Jenson Button P17 retired with a clutch issue. Kevin Magnussen similarly with a clutch issue. Esteban Gutierrez with a retiring due to that collision with Pastor Maldonado in the Lotus. Marcus Ericsson retiring due to an oil leak. Jean-Eric Verne collision damage, and Adrian Sutil retiring due to a collision as well. What do we think of that race? How like first of all, who's your driver of the day? I'll start off with you, George. Who's your driver of the day?
Oh.
Putting you under pressure immediately here.
Yeah,
There's a
like
lot of drives going on.
there's a lot of good drives there. Yeah, put me under pressure like Rosberg did with Hamilton at the restart there. Hamilton's definitely a shout to keep Rosberg behind on slower tyres. I think was extremely impressive. Some incredible defensive moves during that. Perez getting a podium for Force India. Ricardo in not the best Red Bull around a power circuit where Renault engines do struggle, getting fourth. I did not remember him getting that high up. That was really, really impressive. So it's between one of those three guys. The easy answer is Hamilton. I'll go with Hamilton. I'll go with the easy answer.
The easy answer. Owain Medford, are you going for the easy answer?
No, probably not actually. I think I think in some ways they might just go for Perez. Obviously they had the Mercedes engine, but they really did. Oh, as we get the sort of play fighting between Hamilton and Rosberg there, which I think had a little less play maybe in it than we thought actually at this point. No, I think
Yeah.
Perez did a really good job. Obviously been dropped by McLaren previous season. That was probably maybe still lingering in his mind a little bit, but obviously with the Mercedes engine there, and a decent performance out of extracted performance out of the Force India, they gave him a great car in this early stage of the season, and I know he came from, was it third or fourth on the grid, but he still managed to manage that race and withstand the pressure of what would look like a very, very rapid Red Bull behind. So I think he's done well there, and that's why he's my driver of the day for this one.
Yeah, I think some very good suggestions from the both of you there. Lewis Hamilton, of course, withstanding that pressure from Nico Rosberg. Um, Sergio Perez, withstanding the pressure from the Red Bulls, overtaking the Ferraris, just, coming home to bring it into a very solid P3, just ahead of Daniel Ricciardo there. Would have been very easy to, in the race circumstances that we saw, just, maybe lose focus a little bit, allow that gap to close up immediately, and have Daniel Ricciardo come past. Um, but yeah, I think Lewis Hamilton defending for so many laps on the slower tires, using all the tools available. If I remember correctly, use like playing around with the engine modes that maybe Nico Rosberg might not have been doing. Um, because there were just so many more tools available in that, works Mercedes car. And as of course we can see the impact that this race has had on the Drivers' Championship, Hamilton closing that gap in. Um, but yeah, a classic race nonetheless. Wouldn't you agree, George?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this was the race where it was like, right, these two out on track, battling for the first time as teammates in this season, as them being like the lead runners like this. Absolutely classic race, like you said. I mean, showing that it's not just about the Mercedes power units as well. The Red Bull's really mixing it there too. Force India second in the championship. Wow. McLaren down
McLaren
to
somehow
third.
third.
I mean, they led after the first race. It get a lot worse for them though.
Mm.
Yeah, and yeah, just a great race, like you said. Some real surprise results. Fantastic racing throughout the entire field. It was hard for the camera people to actually keep up with all the battles because there were two, three battles going on at the same time at different points in the track, and that's what you want to see. That's what you want to see at the end of the day.
It really is. And Owain, are there any other points you want to mention before we start to wrap this watch along up?
I mean,
Go on.
I was going to say, though, I mean, I will say just the sort of return to form really a bit for Williams. Obviously, it dropped off a little bit in the later in the later stages. And this was a sign of things to come. Really, we kept getting this all season, and it went down to that last race. But it started here. Really, that's the big thing. We this is when we got that the first sort of taste of how good this season was going to be, or how much of a battle it was going to be. Um, I think that's the biggest thing, and also sort of the changing of the guard, where Ferrari and Ferrari just were not good. Neither were McLaren, and I think that sort of that continued for quite a long time afterwards, as we've sort of discussed during it. But it started here. That was when the season changed. I think from the first couple of races where we weren't quite sure.
Yeah, I think without Bahrain 2014, you don't get, the mind games of like Monaco and the alleged deliberate crashing during qualifying to try and secure the win. You don't get the comings togethers later on in, you know, Belgium. You don't get Cota, I think, as well. And you don't get like the 2016s and the coming together in Spain, which ultimately leads to Max Verstappen's win on his first race for Red Bull. Um, but yeah, that that aside, I think this has been a very enjoyable watch along. If you at home want to see us do more of these, let us know in the comments below. Tag us on social media. We're anywhere with the @ symbol. But George, if anyone wants to hear more from you, where can they go?
Thank you, Ruby. Yeah, they can head over to the F1chronicle.com. We're on most of the major platforms when it comes to social media. We've passed 8,500 subscribers on YouTube, which is still a bit scary to be honest. I did a bit of a retrospective of my own recently as well, going over why the V10 era was good, but not as good as what a lot of people have you believe online. So if you want to check out that sort of thing, we do that and lots of other news pieces too. And do I do videos and content for other sports as well, such as football and some of the other motorsports as well, like NASCAR and IndyCar as well. So yeah, if you can check us out on those, really would appreciate it as always.
What's that, George? V10's not being the,
I know,
utopian engineer that, we associate them with,
I
instantly
know,
cancelled by
I
the
know.
motorsport community.
People, hey, look, so far people are agreeing. Early days, I'm sure I'll get someone who's on there just who's disagreeing with it. So far, people are agreeing with me to my pleasant surprise.
Very pleasant surprise indeed, given the state of online discourse these days. Oh, wait,
Hmm.
anything you want to plug at this opportunity?
Just our Grid Talk social channels at Grid Talk UK on all of the social media services with the @ you know, have a look at us on Facebook, preferably on Blue Sky or Threads. Just keep talking to us.
Yeah, please do keep up that conversation. Let us know who was your driver of the day for the Bahrain Grand Prix 2014. Are there any other races you want us to check out for these watch-alongs? Any races that spring to mind? Ideally, we'd want to go for the ones that we've obviously not done our Grid Talk back catalogue of. But speaking of, Grid Talk is available on YouTube, where most of our episodes are recorded live, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music Verbal, and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to the race results. And as you can see, every now and then something a little bit different. Thank you to Jared Bradley and Holly Eagle for supporting us on Patreon. If you want to support the show further, why not sign up to our Patreon for exclusive content and behind the scenes access? Also, make sure you subscribe to be the first to know when each new weekly episode is released. We'll be back soon with plenty more F1 content as the F1 season will, be getting underway once again. Thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye.